was the Navy asking for people who wanted to go and your family were quite keen to go back, or was it just you went where you were told?
Well, the thing is that the naval young people were always being moved around, usually 3 years at a go. But what happened was, when a vacancy came, it was circulated and you sort of put in for it if you were interested. Mum told me that Dad said that sooner or later he would have to be transferred somewhere, and it might be somewhere like Gosport or some terrible place, so why not go back to Hong Kong?
Right.
So he did.
Okay. Would you say you all had happy memories of your time there? Of being in Hong Kong, so it was quite a...
Yes. Oh, well, my mother had a lovely time with no work to do and no cooking and going around the shops and everything like that. We all enjoyed it.
Right. So you were back then in...
Early 38.
Early 38, right.
We lived right next door to the dockyard. It had bricks all round it and nice grounds and a tennis court. It was a block with 6 flats. We had a ground floor flat. The main entrance was locked at night and opened into Queen's Road, directly opposite Sergeant's Mess. And every night, an Indian policeman paraded around, back and forth around our terrace, because you could leave your windows open at night. But we still did lose my dad's revolver and some rings. We never knew what happened to them.
So somehow people were getting in through the window and taking them away?
I don't know whether it was somebody delivering something or something. I don't know. We never discovered. It was a mystery.
Now, your mum wrote a lovely account of living in that area.
Yes.
I think you had a monkey, didn't you?
Yes, we had Paddy, yes.
How did he come into the family?
Oh, Mum and Oliver, they just saw him at a shop and couldn't resist him. Yes, but he was great fun.
I can't imagine anyone having a pet monkey now, but that's popped up a few times in different people's stories. Was it quite a common thing to do?
It was quite common, yes, quite common. And he was mostly on a long chain,
right,
which was attached to our window, our veranda, so that he could get out in the trees, and things like that. He used to sleep in the trees at night. But no, he wasn't my favourite at all.
Now, at 38, there was already sort of signs of war over in southern China, wasn't it?
Yes.
The Japanese were fighting the Chinese there.
Yes. Yes, we were conscious of that. In fact, my dad's younger brother, when he learned that we were going to Hong Kong, he wrote to my dad and said, "You must be mad taking your girls out there with all this going on with Japan and everything," because it was just before the US ship Panay was sunk on the Yangtze by the Japanese. He said, it's a terrible risk to take your girls there. But we thought, well, that's a long way away, the Yangtze.
Yes. And then, of course, the next year, things would all be changing in Europe. War broke out there.
Yeah.
So I guess for a while it seemed like a safe place to be, probably.
It did,
in Hong Kong.
Yes. Yes, in fact, my aunt and uncle, who we often stayed with when we lived in England, she wrote out to us and said, if it wasn't for the journey, we'd come out to Hong Kong to be with you.
Right.
Rather than stay in England with Hitler.
All the blitz and the bombing and everything.
Just as well they didn't.
It was. I guess as the risks grew in Hong Kong, then it was actually planned to evacuate all the women and the children, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That would be about 1940.
It was the summer of 1940.
That's right. So you started off on that, but then events all...
Yes, well, we got as far as Manila waiting for ships, and that's when my dad died.
This was out of the blue, was it? There was no warning of him?
No. It hadn't been well, actually.
Right.
Hadn't been well, but he was still working. And he was not only working in the dockyard in Hong Kong, but they were building a kind of reserve dockyard at Aberdeen in case of war. So and he was going back and forth there all the time. He was working very long hours.
Right.
No, we just... we were on this sugar plantation in Manila, and we came to breakfast one morning, and normally the papers were all on the table,
Right.
and people were reading them, but it was none for us. And so Mum said to the lady, perhaps you can let me see yours when you finished it. And then after we'd had breakfast, the person in charge of the sugar plantation came and told us that they'd seen in the paper that my dad had died.
Oh, and
it was just mentioned there.
Away, right.
They didn't want us to see it.
Right.
And they had immediately phoned Hong Kong to find out details, and found that he died the day before, quite suddenly, and that the thing was that we would stay with the evacuation,
Right.
or we'd be sent back to England.
Right.
This is during the Blitz in England, and but our people, the people who were looking after us on the plantation, booked our passages that very day back to Hong Kong, without any sort of put us on the ship. But of course the funeral had already happened, and then the naval authorities, when we got back, said they booked our passages for the next ship going to UK, and we did our best to fight doing that. We didn't want to go back in the middle of the Blitz anyway,
Yes.
apart from anything else. And also, in the 3 weeks we'd been away, nothing had happened to Hong Kong, and we found out that lots of people who we thought would be evacuated had managed to stay.
Okay.
And in fact, Olive and I both worked for the government, and we both were considered, believe it or not, essential services. We were only shorthand typists, but we were considered essential.
Right.
And we could have stayed anyway, but my dad said we had to go. And my mother had trained to be an auxiliary nurse, she says in her book. She could have got exemption, but Dad said, well, you'll just get caught like rats in a trap if you stay here.
Right.
But then at the last minute, when we were on the ship, which sailed from the naval dockyard, they let the men come on board to say goodbye to us. And he got a letter that had come from Mum saying that, from the ANS, saying that she got exemption. Something, she hadn't got a piece of paper before.
Right.
And he brought this to her, it had come in the post. And he said, you must please yourself. And but he said, the girls have got to go.
Okay, so she was going to stay with you then,
And
wasn't
all our
she?
luggage was aboard, so she never forgave herself for that, but what can you do?
Yes. So you came back and you did manage to stay, wasn't it? You
Yes,
managed-
we had all got our exemptions except for Mabel, who was 16, and it was everybody under 17 that had got to go.
Right.
But while we were still pressing our case, Mabel had her 17th birthday.
Oh, okay.
So it was agreed that she would train to be a nurse, auxiliary nurse, and so that's how we managed it.
Right. And they both ended up nursing, wasn't it? Your
Yes,
mum,
they both.
mum in Happy Valley and...
Mum at Happy Valley, Mabel at the military hospital.
Right. Now, at the time, Mabel wasn't officially a nurse, but I think, was it? She just sort of joined in and...
Yes, she just joined in during the war.
Yeah.
She had started the course, actually, the ANS course, but then she had an exam. She failed it. And at that time, the evacuation thing was gone quiet, So eventually, she worked actually in an army command as a shorthand typist. When the war started, they were told, those girls, no, you can't come in here now. It was Fortress headquarters then, you see.
Right.
So she went and worked in she went to the military hospital because her boyfriend, she was unofficially engaged to at that time, he was one of the first people injured. He was in Bone Road Hospital. So she went to see him. And I think he was one of the first casualties. It was on the Wednesday. When she was leaving the hospital, she passed the matron on the steps, and the matron said to her, what are you doing? Why aren't you in uniform, girl? And she said, I'm not one of your nurses, matron, but I'd like to be. And so that's how she became.
Right. And because of that, because she was in the Bowen Road, when most people went into Stanley, she didn't go in to start with, was it?
No, they didn't. The Japs allowed the nurses to stay on in for about 6 months or so.
Right.
But we got Mabel in a little bit before the main lot did. Mum kept applying for her because Mabel actually hadn't had very good health in 1941. She had a dragging foot, and she also has had a kind of, not a goiter, but that kind of thing.
Right.
And she'd been in hospital, and Mum was worried about her in any case because she was only not very old. And eventually the Japanese allowed four of the nurses, I think, were brought in from Bow Road about June, much to Mabel's disgust. And then the whole lot came about a couple of months later.
I think you say as well that it was a really growing up time for her, that you left her in December, and then when you saw her again coming into camp, I think you write something like, who was this young girl taking command of everything. And
Absolutely, yes, it did. It made a great difference to. When we went to Hong Kong that second time, she was nearly 15. The thing is, she should have gone to Central British School or KG5 as it was. But they had so many subjects that she'd never had that it really would have been hopeless. So she was quite happy to leave school.
Right.
And she went to shorthand typing school and learned to do that instead. But she did want to be a nurse even then, but she was too young to train.
Right. Did she get involved with nursing after the war at all?
No, she didn't, because she got married right at the end of the war and then had children. And so, no, she didn't.
The getting married is a whole other exciting story, but I think we'll save that for another day.